All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Saturday. Let's do a quick sound and video check just one more time. Thank you, Daryl. Smoothest voice in the biz. Good to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on your Saturday. You have clearly made a commitment of sorts to learn and grow. So before we get started, let's do a quick poll. There's a couple things that I'd like to know from you. And then I'm going to talk about kind of the overall expectations and kind of the pace as to what we're going to go into. So first things first, I just want to do a quick poll on age. So let me just throw out, how old are you? And this is just going to help me get a scope. And I'm just going to say, dun da da. And then let's do dun da da. And dun da da means different answer choices. So let's do this. It'll help me. 45, there we go. All right. So if you will throw that out, got my Aloha coconut chapstick brought to you by Chapstick this morning. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing the results come in. We've got about 260 here. Oh man, I just said, hey Anthony, good to see you. Yeah, Anthony, group 1 to do 2. All right. So we have right now, let's post these results so you can see as well. This was important for me because I want to see, what we're working with here. And I will post this out. So we have 78% of y'all are 45 and older, 21% between the ages of 30 and 45. And I'm glad I did that poll. I was like, well, let's find out what the cohort is. Majority here. And that is just good information for me to have as we proceed. So like I said, just a few house cleaning items here before we jump in. How many years of trading experience? We have so far, let's get about 10 more results. We do have a majority of 3+ years, which is nice, which is cool. This is such important information for me. Nice little data points, if you will. All right, so let's post these out so you can see these as well. And then one more little interactive experience here, if you will. And this is a good data point for me as we get rolling because let me send this out because it allows me to know, where do you stand as far as some of the indicators and vCents that we'll talk about if you were present during the webinar. Thank you so much, y'all. I like the idea of a Saturday class. It's nice. All right, we will go, let's get about 5 to 10 more results. Looks like we are cooking. So once again, just good data points here. Okay, now I know kind of how the range, experience, and the majority have 10x bars, and we'll get into indicator, vCents, workspace. Trust me, that's a huge part of setting things up, making sure everything's efficient. Now that we have all this information, I want to give you just some overall expectations. Whenever I was formulating this class, I was thinking, okay, well, I have a bunch of information that I've learned, whether it was through John Carter or Henry Gamble or Mark Douglas, any of the literature that we'll talk about. And I was like, well, what would I have wanted whenever I started trading? What would have really, really helped me? And so my goal for you, my goal is to impart all the knowledge. A pony. Okay, Ivy, welcome to the class. That's funny. That's hilarious. How about a zebra? We got plenty of them. All right. So what I would have benefited from, let's just say 9 years ago. And that is going to be a huge part of this class because, about 2 years ago, I had a succession of aha moments. We'll get into that. And so some of the expectation here is just keep an open mind. And I'm going to have some analogies, metaphors. I'm going to talk about my experience a little bit. And some of my experience is unique, and I'm very careful as to how to portray some of this stuff. So just bear with me. And one major issue that I had, whether it was through high school and college, was I found myself taking a lot of notes, and then at the end having a lot of questions, kind of like relying on my pencil and not opening my ears type of situation. So I just encourage you to just sit back, relax, chill, and let's get it going. So everyone's doing fine, I'm so sure. You're here. Yes, you're present. And so we will go into about 4 o'clock. We'll have a couple breaks, a couple things about being new. Maybe this is your first class. But here are some guidelines. Like I said, I was more of a person where once I realized my problem, which was taking too many notes, 1, you get all the slides. 2, this is recorded. 3, we'll probably repeat a few things. So if you have questions, we'll have breaks, right? And I'll kind of go through, and I know that support is here too to help you with your questions as well. But if for some reason I'm skipping over you, it's totally not intentional. I'm certainly, just trying to get through the ideas. My method is just kind of one step at a time, and then tell a story and kind of just continue to build on small golden nuggets at a time. Okay. So I'll kind of go through a slab of data, and then we'll keep on rolling after, a small break or something like that. So just a couple quotes. I'll throw these in here every once in a while. I really do think that trading, well, I know that trading is a journey to the inner self. And there's a lot of hiccups if you're not aware of issues that might arise, things that bother you, or you're overcompensating for something. But my biggest lesson has been patience. And Lindsay reminds me all the time. She goes, for the rest of your life, you will have to be aware and practice patience. It's true. It is what it is. And there's a couple of reasons why, but I'm human. And 2, it was just like, I guess you baby boomers can also say I'm a millennial and I want it now and I want it instantly. Well, unfortunately, that's not a millennial thing. That's a human thing, right? So, and also I know other traders, and I fit in a pretty large group of other traders where patience is usually not your strong suit. And so, being picky has bid me well, being patient, understanding that a clean setup is super important, and then, of course, staying in the rules. So my expectation for you is to have a relaxed state of mind. You'll be filled with a few aha moments. I'll also, whenever we go through those, now I can't choose what's an aha moment for you, but specifically through my presentation, I have notes here saying, hey, write that down. Or, because even if you do write it down, you're likely to remember it and kind of just write it into, and your subconscious will be like, oh, yes, I remember that. So nice little tools and tricks. So again, like I said, we are talking about tools, how to use them. If you feel lost, like I said, that's perfectly okay. There might be some things that it might need extra explaining, but overall, I mean, it'll be pretty straightforward. Hey, Gavin, good to see you. Wow, I love the crowd here. That's awesome. Patience and the rules for, yeah, okay, Kyle, yep. So we can all relate, right? All right, so don't overthink anything. You don't need to feel overwhelmed about any of this. During live trading, which is going to be paramount to get kind of the real life experience of all this stuff, I know that a lot of y'all have already gotten into some of this with me in the training room. But I do encourage that if you have questions, write it down. If it's something that I'll easier or have an easier time answering, because unfortunately the market's not open, right? So if it's a situational question where we need volume and things like that to kind of express the indicators correctly, just write it down. And then whenever we're in for live trading, that's whenever I'll be going through questions. We'll kind of have more of a back and forth scenario. Okay, so I try to simplify everything as much as possible. This is not the first time I have taught. I've done some economic speeches I did one in Dubai. I've done a lot of orphanage teaching as I was traveling around the world. I've had a few instances where I was speaking at the University of Texas, whether that was on, I don't know, economics or macro events, or just invited to, be on a panel. So I always found that in teaching that it's just best to simplify complex issues, obviously, but some of this stuff can get a little bit, whippy. But I use humor, things like that. So sometimes it is story time, like Elmo says. All right, so here's the aha moments. Remember, we're just talking about micro futures, and the scope is our workspace, how to look at things correctly, and what tools we're going to use. And a lot of this you're already familiar with, MACD, RSI. And this was the reason for that poll, right? So I was going, okay, well, how many years of trading experience do you have? 3+ was 75%, and the majority of y'all are above the ages of 45. Okay, so that all of a sudden is like, okay, well, maybe we don't have to go too far in depth with things because you're already pretty familiar with it. Now, for the small minority, we will, and it'll be kind of light. And then that'll be kind of a way for us to, as we jump into live trading, I'll be like, hey, the MACD says this, the RSI lines up, and what does it all mean anyway? So aha moments is defined by the common human experience of suddenly understanding a previously incomprehensible problem or concept. This is like the most important thing to me, because what I try to hammer into new traders and even experienced traders is that you are never finished learning. I think that the more and more you grow as a trader, you'll understand that it's more about having discipline. They call it market psychology, but it's more like, self-discipline combined with a confidence cocktail and having a set of plans, right? So let's get into it. All right, let's jump in. So this is one of my favorite things to unpack. A lot of people think that trading is just, success, boom, left to right, easy. And what it really is it's a combination. And, I've heard John talk about this a lot, is trading is deceptively hard, and it certainly doesn't have to be, okay? So a trader's main goal is to have one job only. It's not to be right. It's not to analyze correctly what is going to happen next. It's not to call the top or call the bottom. It's not to stare at 5-minute charts. It's not to stay up to date on the latest news. It's actually very simple. We've all seen this, right? And hopefully this is what's happening to you, right? Or hopefully this is what you're creating. A P&L that grows from the bottom left to the upper right of your screen. So a green P&L. So that's your job. And to what degree we can confuse and make this more complicated reflects your P&L, right? So aha moments, self-control, we'll talk about it. And everything that I've talked about is either I've learned it the hard way, and that's what I'm going to forward over to you, is like, hey, I went through this, and this was, the conclusion, and this is how I grew from it. So if you were in the webinar, right, that Henry Ford quote, and this is the idea here, is maybe you find yourself in this maze on the right-hand side. The idea here is to get you here on the left-hand side, where everything that's happened in the past is just messy fluff, and it doesn't really matter anymore, except that you're learning from your mistakes. Yeah, and that's Tame Impala album cover. It's like one of my favorite bands, okay? But it's totally fitting. And I say this because I used to be here in the maze with no no clear view at all. And then now I find myself, not now, but years ago, I finally had a plan. I was like, okay, this can be pretty awesome. And I'm not going to leave this slide on for very long because that kind of makes me dizzy. But we'll talk about no regrets, being okay with losing, and no revenge trades. And by the end of this, we want you to have a crucial understanding of trading in general, specifically to micro futures and the dynamics involved there. You'll see how they're different from minis. You'll see how you can benefit differently and then trade these on different time frames. If you're already an e-mini trader, which you totally could be if you're in this course, you know that also you can trade outside during extended hours, and especially in 2020 and the second half of 2019, really good overnight moves, a lot of volatility, and I like to, it's not my favorite term, but it just is what it is. There's what I call a lot of free money in the overnight because there's a lot of patterns that repeat more consistently. And even though you have, a lack of volume and lack of data going through your indicators and things like that, you can still pick up on some pretty decent sell-offs and, overnight bids, which has been a popular thing here in 2020. Mainly around that midnight hour, whenever all of a sudden the NASDAQ's going up 50 or 100 points. So even though this course will be kind of technical rich, let's not get overwhelmed. So we'll talk about ego, and just know that everything that we've talked about, I've either gone through or I've learned from an incredible mentor. That's me, and it is true. That's an original quote from me, and that is my entire, that's kind of me summarized. It goes back to learning how to ski. It goes back to, playing sports. And what I mean by skiing is what my father taught me whenever I was skiing was, he always made me go down the double black diamonds. Like, first thing, my first ski slope was not a green. It wasn't a blue. It was a black diamond in Ruidoso, New Mexico, Ski Apache, if you're familiar with that one. And, the idea that he had, and he was a great skiing instructor for me, was he goes, pick a spot to where you want to go down on the side of the mountain and get there. And there's a lot of similarities there with trading, whether you're doing options, long calls, profit taking, things like that, or in general, if you have like a different type of strategy, or in micro futures, get to a profit target, and then the trade is over, and then once you're there, just kind of hang out, rest, and then look for the next setup. Okay, so pick your spot and learn and kind of know where you want to go. So a little bit about me. If you weren't in the webinar, I'm just going to go through this briefly about me. 10 years of trading experience. I have a degree in psychology. I started out at Baylor. I got a really weird ear infection by getting into some really dirty water here in Austin at the Colorado River. We flipped over a canoe, and I had Bell's palsy. So for about 2 years, I was recovering from Bell's palsy with half of my face numb. But this is a recurring theme in my life that actually ultimately would lead me to a career in trading, which is quite interesting to me. And so during my downtime, I was reading books. I read Mastering the Trade while I had half a numb face. I was, opening my first E-Trade account. I was going into some of the literature, reading more of Mark Douglas from way, way back in the day. And so I had a lot of downtime. And I also had enough money to actually just trade. And I started out growing small accounts, and it was mainly from like 5K to 8K, something just very small, and going, okay, I can do this. So my main focus is options. I love micro futures, and y'all, micro futures are fairly new. They were added last year, and I think the sky's the limit with some of this stuff. I've had some amazing mentors. There's the Saw's Father on the right-hand side. There's Fib Queen with some of our, I like to call them our VIPs at our mentorship. And then I've had a really good, in-depth, long conversation with Dr. Jordan Peterson about all sorts of topics, but mainly about trading, because he actually has a significant amount of knowledge on trading, and not market psychology, but just general life stuff and talking about things to overcome, which is a huge part of trading. So I've traveled all around the world while trading, and that's one of the things that trading allows you to do, right? So skydiving over Dubai, doing some Cambodia, orphanage work, and doing some dental foundation volunteer work, and just generally like picking up some really cool experiences along the way, going to the top of the highest building in the world or tallest building in the world. And of course, one of my favorite things to do was backpacking South America and living in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And we'll talk about some of these interesting experiences that pertain to trading, and at least I can tie them to trading. And so, during this time, even though the Wi-Fi in South America is pretty much even to horrible, I was still able to trade a little Tesla, still able to trade a little AMD back whenever we had a love affair. And y'all know that if you follow me in the options room, I'm kind of torn, to say the least. I'm a photographer, so these are some original photos from like the San Pedro de Atacama Desert and a nice little church here. And so let's talk about this for a minute. And this is a short story. I've done the best I could to keep it short. But whenever I was backpacking the southern tip of South America and going forward and going up, I actually almost had a near-death experience, and I got lost and took a trail. Was poisoned by an apple that I'd eaten that became toxic in my body. I was dehydrated. And the picture here on the right, after 3 days of hiking back to this drop-off point from this lake, I passed out. I took this picture because I thought it was the last picture that I would take. I was exhausted. It's a short story, but the long version is like probably days long. But generally what happened was I turned around, I got lost, and this ferry picked me up right at the last minute. The reason why it's coming towards me right here is because it was actually coming from the left. They were searching for me, and I fired off my last flare, and then they seen it and then turned around. And the moment this boat started coming towards me, I don't remember anything for the next 2 or 3 days. They picked me up. The next thing I know, I had been in a shower for about 2 days, and they had been feeding me oranges, cheese, and bread. So what happened there was basically I took a trail that hadn't been maintained in 7 years. And the Patagonias are way different than Colorado, because Colorado, you're in the United States, one, first of all. Two, you have park rangers and you have a search team. Three, it's Colorado, and some parts of Colorado can be extreme like the Patagonias, but the Patagonias is you're in the middle of nowhere. There's no one else around. Okay. Not to mention there's pumas. And if you know anything about pumas or the cat family, pumas are one of the only, I think the only predatorial cat. In other words, they'll set traps. They'll put leaves, branches on a trail, and they'll sit by it for days or hours. And if anything cracks the branches, they know that their trap is set. And so I definitely stepped on a few. I definitely turned around a couple times in the middle of the night while I was sick, poisoned, and lost, where I heard the growls of a puma. And this is puma country. This isn't like, just one puma. This is where most of the pumas in the world are at. I was right in the middle of their world. And so long story short, there were plenty of times where it was a different type of intestinal fortitude, right? We talk about that in trading. We talk about, whether it was you blew up an account or had to take a huge loss. That's one way of building intestinal fortitude in trading. But as far as life goes, intestinal fortitude, kind of understanding and facing death, falling off a 30-foot cliff, sprained ankle, dehydrated, passing out, even hallucinating something that kind of told me to wake up, and just a few things that were really, really troubling. So I have a really interesting outlook on life. I'm grateful for every day to be alive, that whole type of thing. And I've got to say, looking back, it's an interesting experience, and I'm still unraveling as to why it happened to me. A lot of it had to do with initiation into manhood, initiation into adulthood, initiation into appreciation and gratitude for the things in your life. And whenever you're sitting there, somewhat halfway hallucinating, kind of writing a note, your last note, there's a lot of things that go into that. And, coming out of that experience, certainly a life-changing experience. So intestinal fortitude, and it brought me here. So I continue to think about trading as it doesn't have to be, the highs don't have to be super high, and the lows certainly don't need to be super low. And during my travels, there was a ton of experiences like that. And I just couldn't stop. In fact, whenever I was in the Patagonias, I couldn't stop thinking about trading, because this is how much I love trading. Whenever I was suffering alone, no one around, I was thinking, like, I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but I was like, man, I really love trading. I'm not gonna be able to do this again if this goes down. I remember I was like, man, I really was grateful to be a trader, for that time. And, why is this, all the thoughts come into your head, but it was weird. Like, how could you be so in love with trading? And it's just a passion. And I was like, well, if I make it back, I'm going to be a full-time trader, no doubt, obviously. And so that's one of the ideas that I unraveled was, during this time, I found out just how much I love trading. And so one thing that I understand really, really well from the get-go was the euphoria, the anxiety, all this other stuff involved. And so, like, whenever you're here, you're buying, and there's the euphoria. And then you're like, hey, remember what John Carter says, making money in the market is easy, holding on to it is the hard part. And that's certainly true. That's been true with me. And so we'll go through some of these cycles as we go through this. I spent some time in the Amazon rainforest with a shaman drinking ayahuasca, and that was another life-changing event. We'll talk about the snake. We'll talk about the anaconda. Obviously, a stock market chart looks like a snake, but there is an analogy here. And whenever you're holding an anaconda is way different from any other snake. They have a really kooky personality. This one certainly did as well. And they tend to play games with you the moment they pick you up. They automatically ask for your attention. They will move their body around your body and kind of go, oh, how are you reacting to this? You can see where this is going. So, if you experience a lot of hesitancy, anxiety in the markets, you're probably, over positioning. You're not really respecting the rules. And, the snake will stare at you and go, okay, well, how much do you want to give me? So whenever you have an anaconda on you, something is activated, and it'll play games, and it'll ask you kind of like, are you going to stick to the rules? Are you going to drop me? How hungry? Things like that. And I always think that whenever I'm trading, I tend to, gravitate towards things like, okay, well, this thing, if I don't pay attention to the rules, if I don't handle with care, this thing's going to come and bite me in the face. So that's the analogy there. And then as we go through the live trading, I have some things that will be, once again, applied to this situation. This snake was actually really cool. It would stare at me, and it would kind of like smile, and then it would say, what game do you want to play next? And it would move really fast, and I would freak out and think I'm being attacked, and it would just move and go, oh, did you like that? Or, does that freak you out? So weird experiences building like this life intestinal fortitude, being around a native snake in the Amazon rainforest. But this had an interesting personality. Once again, the stock market is, and especially the options world, is full of risk and leverage, right? And so when holding an anaconda, you're definitely taking a risk. But also the reward was, hey, this thing actually was teaching me some things. So let's keep on rolling here.